The Galactic Council had always prided itself on maintaining order across the known systems. For 3,000 years, they had governed with wisdom and careful deliberation, ensuring that every species knew their place in the grand hierarchy of civilization. The massive crystalline chamber on Nexus Prime hummed with the voices of dozens of different alien species, each representative speaking through their translation matrices. Ambassador Zektar of the Hegemony adjusted his forearms as he reviewed the daily reports. His species, the Velanathi, had been members of the Council for over 2 millennia, and their natural patience made them excellent mediators. Today's agenda seemed routine enough until a junior aide approached with trembling tentacles. "Ambassador," the aide whispered, "we have received another transmission from the restricted zone." "The restricted zone?" Zektar's breathing slits narrowed. For the past 50 years, that particular section of space had been marked off-limits after several exploration vessels had simply vanished. The Council had eventually declared it a navigational hazard and forbidden any ships from entering the region. The matter had been largely forgotten, relegated to old files and dusty archives. "What does it say?" Zektar asked, though he already suspected he didn't want to know. The aide activated a small holographic display. The message was brief, transmitted in the common trade language that most species could understand. The words appeared in stark, glowing letters: "Stay away, final. Warning, humanity does not wish. Contact violation will result in defensive action." Zektar studied the message with growing irritation. Humanity, he had heard whispers of this species before, though nothing concrete. Some claimed they were myths. Others suggested they were simply another primitive species that had somehow stumbled into space travel. The Council's xenobiologists had classified them as unconfirmed sentients and filed them away with hundreds of other unverified reports. "How many times have we received this message?" he asked. "This is the 47th transmission in the past 2 years, Ambassador." Each one identical to the last. The ambassador's patience was wearing thin. The Council prided itself on bringing order to chaos, on civilizing the primitive and integrating them into galactic society. No species had the right to simply declare an entire region off-limits, especially not some unverified collection of savages who couldn't even be bothered to make proper contact within hours. The message had made its way to the full Council. The debate was swift and decisive. High Counselor Morenvas, whose species had conquered half their home system before achieving spaceflight, was particularly vocal in her outrage. "This is unprecedented," she declared, her crystalline form shimmering with indignation. "No species has ever had the audacity to threaten the Council itself. These humans clearly need to be taught proper respect for galactic law." Counselor Thresh of the Dominion nodded his massive head in agreement. "My fleets could pacify the entire region within a solar cycle. A few demonstrations of proper firepower should bring them to heel." Zektar found himself agreeing, though something about the situation nagged at him. The warnings had been remarkably consistent, and whoever these humans were, they had managed to maintain their isolation for decades. That suggested either advanced technology or remarkable cunning. Still, the Council's authority could not be challenged. The decision was unanimous. A joint fleet would be assembled, not for conquest, but for what the Council termed a diplomatic intervention. They would enter the restricted zone, locate these humans, and bring them into compliance with galactic law. If they resisted, well, the Council had dealt with resistant species before. Preparations began immediately. Ships from 12 different species were selected, representing the finest examples of Council military technology. The fleet was impressive. Massive dreadnoughts capable of glassing entire continents, swift destroyers that could outrun anything in known space, and carriers loaded with fighter craft that could swarm any opposition. Admiral Korthuk of the Hegemony Navy was chosen to lead the expedition. He was a veteran of 17 campaigns and had never lost a battle. His tactical brilliance was legendary, and his patience with primitive species was well documented. If anyone could handle first contact with these humans, it was him. The fleet gathered at Staging Point 7, a military installation 3 systems away from the restricted zone. As the ships assembled, their crews buzzed with excitement and anticipation. Many had never seen combat, and the prospect of facing an unknown enemy was thrilling rather than concerning. Intelligence reports were sparse. Long-range sensors had detected some activity in the restricted zone over the years, but nothing that suggested a major civilization. There were signs of space traffic, but the energy signatures were unfamiliar. Some analysts suggested the humans might be using primitive fusion drives, while others theorized about exotic propulsion systems. What everyone agreed on was that any species capable of maintaining isolation for so long was either hiding something valuable or possessed of technology worth studying. Either way, the Council would benefit from bringing them under its authority. As the fleet made final preparations, Admiral Korthduck reviewed the mission parameters one last time. Primary objective: establish contact with the human species and bring them into compliance with galactic law. Secondary objective: assess their technology and resources for potential integration. Tertiary objective: if they proved hostile or uncooperative, demonstrate sufficient force to ensure submission. The Admiral's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. It was a straightforward mission, the kind he had handled dozens of times before. Primitive species always followed the same pattern when faced with superior force. They would bluster and threaten at first, then quickly realize they were outmatched. Within days, they would be begging to join the Council and contribute to galactic civilization. The fleet commander activated the ship-wide communication system, addressing all vessels simultaneously. Attention all personnel. We stand on the threshold of another great achievement for the Galactic Council. Today, we extend the hand of civilization to a species that has chosen isolation over cooperation. We go not as conquerors, but as teachers. Show them the strength of unity, the power of cooperation, and the wisdom of submission to proper authority. Cheers echoed across the fleet as ships began moving toward the jump points that would take them into the restricted zone. None of them noticed the small, dark objects that had been silently observing their preparations from the outer edges of the system. Objects that now turned and accelerated away at speeds that should have been impossible. Carrying word of the approaching fleet to destinations unknown, the Council's great fleet moved toward its destiny. Confident in its superiority and certain of its success, they had ignored the warnings for the last time. The Council fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of what their charts designated as the human restricted zone. Admiral Korthduck stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, watching his tactical displays populate with sensor data. 12 dreadnoughts, 36 cruisers, and over 100 support vessels spread out in perfect formation. Their combined firepower capable of reducing entire star systems to cosmic dust. "Sir," reported his sensor officer, a young Velanathi whose excitement was barely contained, "we're detecting multiple energy signatures throughout the system. Artificial constructs? Definitely not natural phenomena?" Korthduck nodded approvingly. At least these humans had achieved some level of technological development. It would make the integration process smoother if they had something to contribute to galactic society. Analysis? The constructs appear to be orbital installations, sir. Weapons platforms, most likely. Energy readings are unusual, though. I'm not recognizing the power signatures. Primitive fusion technology, no doubt, the Admiral dismissed. What about their fleet? The sensor officer's confusion was evident in his posture. That's just it, sir. I'm not detecting any major fleet movements. Some smaller vessels scattered throughout the system, but nothing that would constitute a military response to our presence. This was puzzling. In Korthduck's experience, primitive species either fled in terror when faced with Council fleets or gathered every available ship for a desperate last stand. These humans seemed to be doing neither. "Open a channel," he ordered. "All frequencies, maximum power. Let's see if we can establish communication." The communication array hummed to life, broadcasting the Admiral's message across the entire system. This is Admiral Korthuk of the Galactic Council Fleet. You are in violation of interstellar law by maintaining an unauthorized restricted zone. Surrender your sovereignty to the Council for proper integration into galactic civilization. You have one standard time unit to comply. The response came faster than expected, transmitted on a tight beam directly to his flagship. The voice was distinctly alien, speaking in the trade language with an accent none of the bridge crew had heard before. Admiral Korthuk, this is Commander Sarah Chun of the Sol Defense Network. You have entered human space without permission and ignored multiple warnings. You have 3 minutes to reverse course and leave our territory. This is your only warning. The bridge fell silent. In 3,000 years of Council history, no primitive species had ever dared to threaten a Council fleet. The audacity was breathtaking. Several officers looked to their admiral, waiting for his response. Korthuk's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. Commander Chun, you seem to misunderstand the situation. This fleet represents the combined military might of 12 different species. We have firepower sufficient to sterilize every world in this system. I suggest you reconsider your position. Admiral, came the response. And there was something in the human's tone that made the bridge crew shift uncomfortably. You seem to misunderstand what you've walked into. Final warning. Leave now. The Admiral's patience evaporated. All ships attack formation. Target their orbital installations. Let's show these primitives what happens when they threaten the Council. The massive fleet began moving deeper into the system, weapons charging and targeting systems locking onto the scattered human platforms. It was then that the situation began to change in ways none of them had anticipated. The first indication that something was wrong came from the sensor array. Sir, the officer called out, his voice tight with confusion. I'm reading massive energy spikes from the asteroid belt. No, wait. Those aren't asteroids. On the main display, what had appeared to be a standard asteroid field suddenly came alive. Hundreds of objects that had been masquerading as space rocks revealed themselves to be ships. Not just any ships, but vessels unlike anything in Council databases. They were sleek, dark, and moved with a precision that spoke of advanced artificial intelligence. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, I'm reading over 600 vessels emerging from concealment. Energy weapons charging. Sir, their power output is... This can't be right. Korthuk studied the readings himself. The numbers were impossible. Each of those human ships was generating more energy than some of his heavy cruisers. Sensor malfunction. Run a full diagnostic. No malfunction, sir. Also, I'm detecting movement from the outer planets. Something big is moving out there. The Admiral watched as his tactical display updated in real time. The humans weren't just revealing hidden ships, they were unveiling an entire hidden infrastructure. Orbital platforms that had looked like minor installations were powering up to reveal themselves as massive weapons arrays. Space stations that hadn't registered on sensors were decloaking throughout the system. How many ships? He asked quietly. Current count is 1,400 and rising, sir. And sir, they're not using any propulsion technology in our databases. No fusion drives, no antimatter signatures. I don't know how they're moving. Korthuk felt the first stirring of something he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare, uncertainty. This wasn't following the pattern. Primitive species didn't have advanced stealth technology. They didn't have fleets that could match Council task forces. They certainly didn't have the tactical sophistication to coordinate this kind of reveal. His communication officer straightened. Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet. Audio only. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was the same human commander from before, but the tone had changed. There was no longer any attempt at diplomacy. Admiral Korthuk, you now have 2 minutes to begin withdrawal from human space. Your fleet is currently targeted by over 3,000 individual weapon systems. Our defensive doctrine is simple. Any foreign military force that enters our space with hostile intent will be destroyed. 3,000 weapon systems? Korthuk muttered. That's impossible. His sensor officer looked up from his console, his face pale. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive objects moving in from the system's edge. Whatever they are, they're huge. Dreadnought class or larger. The Admiral made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Pride, 3,000 years of council superiority, and sheer disbelief in what his sensors were telling him drove him forward. All ships, continue advance. Prepare to fire on my command. The human response was immediate and devastating. The first salvo came from the concealed platforms in the asteroid belt. Beams of coherent energy unlike anything in Council databases lanced out across impossible distances. They didn't just hit their targets. They carved through Council shields like they weren't there. 6 cruisers simply ceased to exist in the first 3 seconds of combat. Shields down to 60%. His defensive coordinator shouted, "How is that possible?" That was one hit. The human ships moved like nothing the Admiral had ever seen. They didn't accelerate gradually like normal vessels. They simply changed direction and speed as if momentum meant nothing to them. Their weapons fired continuously, streams of energy that seemed to bend space itself. Return fire. All ships return fire. The Council fleet responded with everything they had. Plasma cannons that could melt continents, particle beams that could crack moons, kinetic rounds that hit with the force of asteroid impacts. The space between the fleets lit up with enough energy to power entire civilizations. The human response was a demonstration of technology that shouldn't have existed. Their ships didn't just dodge the incoming fire. They seemed to phase in and out of reality. Council weapons passed harmlessly through space where human vessels had been microseconds before. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, terror creeping into his voice. "We're not hitting anything. Our targeting computers can't lock onto them. It's like they're not entirely there." Korthuk watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy that fought with impossible technology and impossible tactics. This wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The humans were showing the Council exactly how outclassed they were. The massive objects from the system's edge finally came into sensor range, and the Admiral's blood ran cold. They were ships, if they could be called that. Each one was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapon systems that made his dreadnoughts look like children's toys. "All ships," he transmitted, his voice barely steady, "retreat to minimum safe distance. Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace." But as his fleet tried to withdraw, they discovered that the humans had one final surprise waiting for them. Admiral Korthuk's retreat order echoed across the Council fleet. But as his ships began their withdrawal maneuvers, they discovered something that chilled every crew member to their core. They couldn't leave. "Sir," his navigation officer reported, his voice cracking with panic, "hyperspace drives are offline." "Not damaged, just offline. Something is preventing us from jumping." The Admiral stared at his displays in disbelief. The human fleet wasn't pursuing them as they pulled back. Instead, they had formed a perfect sphere around the Council forces. Every escape route was blocked by vessels that moved like ghosts and hit like supernovas. "How is that possible?" Korthuk demanded. "Hyperspace interdiction requires massive energy expenditure. It's only theoretical in our most advanced research." His science officer, a brilliant Thenari physicist, looked up from her console with wonder and terror in her large eyes. "Sir, I'm detecting a gravitational field that shouldn't exist. They're somehow manipulating space-time itself. The mathematical models suggest they're folding space around us, creating a pocket dimension." Before the Admiral could respond, his communication array activated without being commanded. Every screen on the bridge displayed the same image, a human female wearing what appeared to be a dark military uniform. Her expression was calm, almost bored, as if destroying Council fleets was a routine morning exercise. "Admiral Korthuk," she said, her voice carrying an authority that made hardened warriors across 12 species instinctively straighten. "My name is Admiral Elena Vasquez, Supreme Commander of the Sol Defense Network. You have violated our space, ignored our warnings, and opened fire on our installations. Under the human defense doctrine, your fleet is now considered a hostile invasion force. Korthuk tried to respond, but the human continued without pause. However, because this appears to be your first encounter with humanity, we're prepared to offer you a choice. You can surrender immediately and submit to detention while we decide what to do with you. Or you can continue this engagement and discover exactly why we've remained isolated for so long. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of damaged systems. Around them, the Council fleet hung motionless in space, completely surrounded by human vessels that defied every law of physics the Admiral understood. "Admiral Vasquez," Korthuk finally managed, "you don't understand what you're dealing with? This fleet represents the combined might of the Galactic Council. Attack us, and you'll face the wrath of 3,000 years of civilization." The human's laugh was genuinely amused. "Admiral, let me help you understand something. Humanity has been watching your council for over 2 centuries. We know exactly who you are, how you think, and what you're capable of. Did you really believe that a species capable of detecting your surveillance drones and hiding entire star systems wouldn't have studied the neighbors?" Images began appearing on the bridge displays, showing detailed schematics of council ships, tactical analyses of their weapon systems, and what appeared to be complete intelligence files on major council species. The depth of information was staggering. "How?" the Admiral whispered. "We've been among you for generations, Admiral. Humans are remarkably adaptable. When properly modified, we can pass for dozens of different species. We've walked the halls of your council chambers, served on your ships, lived in your cities. We know your strengths, your weaknesses, and most importantly, we know your intentions toward species like us." The implications hit Korthuk like a physical blow. If the humans had infiltrated council society to this extent, they would know about the forced integration protocols, the re-education programs, the systematic elimination of non-compliant species. "You're afraid of us," he realized. "Afraid?" Admiral Vasquez tilted her head thoughtfully. "No, Admiral. We're not afraid of you. We're afraid of what we might become if we joined your council." New images appeared on the displays, showing human soldiers in combat. But these weren't normal battlefields. The environments were hellish beyond imagination, worlds where the atmosphere was liquid methane, where gravity was strong enough to crush most species, where radiation levels would kill a council citizen in minutes. And in these impossible environments, humans thrived. You see, Admiral, humanity comes from what you would call a Class 12. Death world, everything on our planet evolved to kill everything else. Our weather can destroy continents. Our biology is so aggressive that we have to constantly fight our own immune systems to stay alive. We're persistence predators who evolved to chase prey across vast distances until they collapsed from exhaustion. The human paused, letting that sink in before continuing. Now, when we joined galactic civilization, something interesting happened. We discovered that every other species came from garden worlds, where evolution was gentle and cooperation was the key to survival. You've built a society based on consensus, careful deliberation, and the assumption that reasonable beings will always choose peace. That's how civilized species behave, Korthuk protested weakly. Perhaps. But it's also created a fundamental problem. Your council has grown soft, Admiral. You've forgotten that the universe is hostile and unforgiving. You've built your entire civilization on the premise that nothing truly dangerous exists. The displays changed again, showing human colonies on worlds that the Council had classified as uninhabitable. Humans walking unprotected on surfaces that would boil the blood of most species. Human children playing in environments that would require full environmental suits for Council citizens. We realized early in our contact with galactic civilization that we represented something unprecedented, a species that was both intelligent and genuinely dangerous. Not dangerous because we choose to be, but dangerous because that's simply what we are. Admiral Vasquez leaned forward, her expression becoming deadly serious. Your Council's standard protocol for dealing with dangerous species is elimination, Admiral. We know because we've seen it happen. The Zephyrians who refused integration, the nomad clans who wouldn't submit to territorial restrictions, the synthetic collective who demanded recognition as true life forms, all gone. All eliminated for the greater good of galactic peace. Those were necessary actions, Korthuk argued, but his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps they were. But when the Council looked at humanity, they saw the same threat. A species that couldn't be controlled, couldn't be contained, and couldn't be eliminated easily. So they decided to contain us instead, hoping we'd eventually destroy ourselves. The Admiral's mandibles clicked nervously. The isolation protocol was for your own protection, was it? The human smile was predatory. Tell me, Admiral, what was the Council planning to do if we had developed faster-than-light travel and started expanding into other systems? Korthuk didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Exactly. So we made a choice. We withdrew from galactic society and built our own civilization. We advanced our technology in directions your species never considered. We prepared for the day when the Council would decide that isolation wasn't enough. The displays now showed impossible cities floating in space, artificial worlds that defied physics, and manufacturing centers that seemed to bend reality itself. The warnings we sent weren't threats, Admiral. They were genuine attempts to avoid this confrontation. Because once humanity stops hiding, once we reveal what we've become in our isolation, the galaxy will never be the same. Admiral Vasquez stood, her image dominating every screen on the Council fleet. So here's your choice, Admiral. You can surrender now, return to your Council, and report that humanity is not interested in rejoining galactic society. Or you can continue this fight and force us to demonstrate exactly why the universe produced a species like us. The Admiral looked around his bridge, seeing the fear in his crew's eyes. His fleet was trapped, outgunned, and facing an enemy that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of reality. But he was a Council officer, bound by duty and 3,000 years of tradition. What guarantee do we have that you'll let us leave if we surrender? None, the human replied simply. But Admiral, if we wanted to destroy your fleet, would we really need to have this conversation? As if to emphasize her point, one of the massive moon-sized human ships moved closer, its weapon systems powering up with enough energy to be detected from 3 star systems away. The silence stretched across the void as Admiral Korthuk weighed his impossible options. Around his flagship, the Council fleet hung motionless in space, completely surrounded by human vessels that had redefined everything he thought he knew about warfare and technology. The massive moon-sized ship dominated his view screen, its surface covered in weapon arrays that could probably destroy his entire fleet with a single volley. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered urgently, I'm detecting energy readings from that ship that are off our measurement scales. If those are weapons? I know, Korthuk replied grimly. He opened a channel to all ships in his fleet. All vessels, stand down weapons and prepare to receive surrender terms. The response from his captains was immediate and horrified. Captain Vexith of the Dreadnought Infinite Majesty was the first to protest. Admiral, we can't surrender to primitives. The Council has never faced anything like this. Korthuk cut him off. Look at your sensors, Captain. Look at what we're facing and tell me you want to test their capabilities further. Admiral Vasquez's image reappeared on their screens. A wise decision, Admiral. Prepare to receive boarding parties. Your crews will be processed individually and your ships will be impounded pending investigation. Boarding parties? Korthuk's sensor officer called out in alarm. Sir, I'm not detecting any approaching vessels. That's when they learned about another aspect of human technology that defied comprehension. Throughout the Council fleet, crew members began reporting impossible sightings, humans simply appearing in sealed corridors, walking through walls as if they weren't there, materializing in secured command centers. The boarding party that appeared on Korthuk's bridge consisted of 3 humans in dark armor that seemed to absorb light. They didn't use airlocks or transporter technology. One moment the bridge was secure, the next moment the humans were there, having somehow bypassed every security system and physical barrier. Adaptive phase technology, one of them explained. noticing the Admiral's stunned expression. Your molecular scanners can't detect us because we're not entirely in your dimensional phase when we don't want to be. The lead human, a tall woman with cybernetic implants visible along her temples, approached Korthduck with casual confidence. Admiral, I'm Commander Torres. Sol Marine Corps, you and your senior staff will be transferred to our processing facility for debriefing. Your crew will remain aboard their vessels under guard. What kind of debriefing? The Admiral asked warily. We need to understand exactly what the Council knows about humanity and what they were planning to do with that information. Don't worry, we don't use torture or coercion. We have much more elegant methods for extracting information. Korthduck soon discovered what she meant. The processing facility was located aboard one of the smaller human ships, but its interior defied the laws of physics. Corridors stretched farther than the ship's external dimensions should have allowed. Rooms existed in spaces that couldn't possibly fit within the vessel's hull. Dimensional folding technology, Commander Torres explained as she led him through impossible architecture. We learned to manipulate space-time as a necessity. When you're hiding entire civilizations, you need to make efficient use of limited space. The debriefing chamber was surprisingly comfortable, furnished with chairs and tables that adjusted automatically to accommodate his physiology. What wasn't comfortable was the realization that the humans already knew everything he might have told them. Admiral, said the human conducting his interview, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and the bearing of a career officer. I'm Colonel Martinez, Sol Intelligence Division. Before we begin, I want you to understand that this isn't an interrogation. We're simply confirming information we already possess. Holographic displays activated around the room, showing detailed intelligence reports about the Council's military capabilities, political structure, and expansion protocols. The depth of information was staggering, covering everything from strategic resource allocation to the personal habits of individual council members. How long? Korthduck asked quietly. How long have you been watching us? Since first contact, Admiral. When humanity initially encountered Council scouts 200 years ago, we made a strategic decision. Instead of revealing ourselves, we chose to study you first. It was fortunate that we did. New displays showed records of Council meetings, classified documents detailing integration protocols, and strategic plans for dealing with problematic species. Korthduck watched with growing horror as humanity's infiltration of Council society was laid bare in meticulous detail. Agent Designate. Phoenix 7 served aboard Council vessels for over 30 years, Martinez continued. Agent Nightfall worked in the Council archives for 2 decades. Agent Starburn was actually elected to a minor Council position before we recalled her. Impossible. Our security protocols, our biological scanners, are designed to detect known species attempting to disguise themselves as other known species, Martinez finished. They were never designed to detect a completely unknown species using technology you didn't know existed. The Colonel activated another display showing human agents in various alien forms. The transformations weren't costumes or surgical alterations. They were complete biological restructuring at the cellular level. Adaptive biology, Admiral. Another gift from our Deathworld evolution. Humans can survive in environments that would kill most species, but more importantly, we can adapt to those environments. With proper genetic therapy and technological enhancement, we can modify ourselves to mimic almost any biological form. Korthduck stared at images of humans who had perfectly mimicked Velanathi, Thanari, even the crystalline hegemony species. The Council will never accept this. When they learn what you've done. The Council already knows, Admiral. Martinez's tone became grave. 3 days ago, we transmitted a complete intelligence package to every member of the Council. Every classified document, every secret protocol, every plan for dealing with dangerous species. Your government has been exposed to its own citizens. The Admiral's breathing slits constricted. You've started a war. No, Admiral. We've prevented one. The Colonel leaned forward. Do you know what the Council's final protocol was for dealing with humanity? Operation Stellar Cleansing. Complete sterilization of every world in our space, followed by careful monitoring to ensure no human colonies survived elsewhere in the galaxy. Images appeared showing the classified operation plans, complete with timetables, resource allocations, and casualty estimates. Korthuk recognized the authorization codes and command signatures. This wasn't theoretical. It was a real plan that had been approved at the highest levels. The operation was scheduled to begin in 6 months, Martinez continued. Your fleet's mission wasn't just first contact, Admiral. You were the reconnaissance force, gathering final intelligence before the main assault? I didn't know, Korthuk whispered. My orders were for diplomatic intervention. We know. Most Council military personnel weren't briefed on the full scope of the operation. That's why we're treating your forces as prisoners of war rather than genocidal invaders. The Colonel stood and activated a final holographic display. This one showed human fleets, vast armadas that dwarfed anything the Council could assemble. Ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, and defensive systems that made the earlier demonstration look like a minor skirmish. This is what 200 years of preparation looks like, Admiral. This is what happens when a species that evolved to survive anything the universe could throw at them decides to take their survival seriously. The display zoomed out, showing the scope of human expansion. Hidden colonies scattered across the galaxy, research installations in pocket dimensions, and manufacturing centers that existed in folded space. Humanity hadn't just been hiding. They had been building an empire that existed parallel to Council space. We don't want war with the Council, Martinez said quietly. But we will no longer hide from you. Humanity is returning to galactic society, but on our terms this time. What terms? Korthuk asked, though he dreaded the answer. Complete dissolution of the current Council structure. Establishment of a new galactic government based on true equality rather than integration and assimilation. Recognition of humanity's right to exist as we are? Not as you want us to be. The Colonel paused, studying the Admiral's reaction. And prosecution of Council leadership for crimes against sapient species. The galaxy deserves to know what their government has been doing in the name of peace and order. Admiral Korthuk sat in stunned silence, realizing that his fleet's arrival hadn't started a conflict. It had triggered the culmination of a plan 2 centuries in the making. Humanity had played the longest game in galactic history, and they had already won. The aftermath of humanity's revelation spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. On Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council, emergency sessions convened as the full scope of human infiltration became clear. The intelligence package they had transmitted contained decades of classified documents, personal communications between Council leaders, and detailed plans that were never meant to see the light of day. High Counselor Morenva stood before the assembled representatives. Her crystalline form dimmed with something approaching shame. The chamber that had once hummed with confident authority now buzzed with panic and recrimination. Fellow counselors, she began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber, we face an unprecedented crisis. Not only have our security protocols been completely compromised, but the very foundation of our authority has been questioned by species across the galaxy. The leaked documents had revealed the true nature of Council integration protocols. Species across the galaxy were learning for the first time about the forced relocations, the cultural suppression programs, and the systematic elimination of groups that refused to conform. Worlds that had believed they joined the Council voluntarily discovered they had been subtly coerced through economic manipulation and military pressure. Counselor Thresh of the Dominion rose from his massive seat, his voice booming with barely controlled rage. This is an act of war. The humans have attacked the very core of our civilization. We must respond with overwhelming force. With what force? Demanded Counselor Vakthara of the Outer Territories. Our best fleet is currently imprisoned by ships that can appear and disappear at will. Our intelligence networks have been completely exposed. And now we learn that humans have been among us for 2 centuries, watching, learning, preparing. The debate that followed was unlike anything in Council history. For 3,000 years, decisions had been made through careful consensus, with disagreements resolved through patient deliberation. Now, representatives were openly shouting at each other, accusations flying across species lines as old alliances crumbled. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, humanity was preparing for the next phase of their plan. Admiral Vasquez stood in the command center of Terra Station, a massive orbital facility that had been constructed in folded space above Earth. Around her, holographic displays showed real-time intelligence from across the galaxy as human agents emerged from deep cover to coordinate what they called the revelation. Status report, she requested from her intelligence coordinator. Phase 1 is complete, Admiral, Commander Chun reported. All Council intelligence networks have been mapped and compromised. Phase 2 is ahead of schedule. 17 species have declared independence from Council authority, and 12 more are considering it. Opposition forces? The Hegemony and Dominion are mobilizing their remaining fleets, but they're facing internal resistance. Many of their own military commanders are questioning orders after learning about Operation Stellar Cleansing. Chun paused, reviewing her data. We're also receiving communication requests from over 40 species, wanting to establish direct diplomatic relations with humanity. Admiral Vasquez nodded grimly. This was the moment they had spent 2 centuries preparing for, but success brought its own dangers. And the Purist Coalition? That's our primary concern, Chun admitted. Admiral Korthduk warned us about them during his debriefing. They're a faction within the Council that believes non-conforming species should be eliminated entirely. They see our revelation as proof that their approach was correct. The Purist Coalition represented the most dangerous element of Council society. Unlike the mainstream Council, which sought to integrate and control other species, the Purists wanted to eliminate anything that didn't fit their vision of galactic order. They had been a minority voice for centuries. But the human revelation was giving them new support. In the depths of Council space, Admiral Zerthak of the Purist Coalition stood aboard his flagship, the Eternal Purity, addressing an emergency gathering of like-minded commanders. His species, the Kethmori, had joined the Council early in its history and believed strongly in their own superiority. Brothers and sisters, he declared, his razor-sharp teeth gleaming in the command center's lighting. Today we face the greatest threat in galactic history. Not just a dangerous species, but one that has proven capable of deception on an unprecedented scale. Around him, officers from a dozen species nodded in agreement. These were the hardliners, the ones who had always argued for more aggressive action against non-compliant species. The humans have shown us the ultimate flaw in the Council's soft approach, Zerthak continued. We tried to contain them, tried to wait for them to destroy themselves, and instead they grew stronger in secret. They played us for fools while preparing for our destruction. Admiral Zerthak activated a holographic display showing tactical analyses of the human fleet's capabilities. The data was incomplete but terrifying in its implications. Look at what they've become? Ships that exist partially outside normal space. Weapons that manipulate the fundamental forces of physics. Biology that adapts to any environment. They are not just dangerous. They are an existential threat to every other species in the galaxy. What do you propose? Asked Commander Yixtile of the Hegemony Guard. Operation Final Solution, Zerthak replied. We use every weapon at our disposal. Stellar engineers to destabilize their star systems. Quantum bombs to collapse their folded space installations. Biological weapons to eliminate any surviving populations. The plan was monstrous in scope. The Purist Coalition had been secretly developing weapons of mass destruction for centuries, hiding their research in classified facilities throughout Council space. Now they wanted to use everything they had ever created to ensure humanity's complete extinction back in the Sol system. Human intelligence networks detected the Purist Coalition's mobilization within hours. Admiral Vasquez convened an emergency meeting with humanity's top military and political leaders, including representatives from the hidden colonies that had been established throughout the galaxy. "The situation is escalating faster than our models predicted," she reported. "The Purist Coalition is moving to implement what they're calling Operation Final Solution. They're not interested in negotiation or coexistence. They want humanity completely eliminated." President Harrison, the elected leader of the Human Federation, studied the intelligence reports with growing alarm. "How long do we have?" "Our agents suggest they could begin operations within 2 weeks," Admiral Vasquez replied. "They're mobilizing fleets from hidden bases, activating weapons platforms that don't officially exist, and calling in favors from species that have been secretly supporting their ideology. Can we stop them?" "Yes," the Admiral said simply, "but not without revealing the full extent of our capabilities. Phase 3 of our plan was designed to be implemented gradually over several years. The Purist Coalition is forcing us to accelerate our timeline." Phase 3 was humanity's final contingency plan. For 2 centuries, they had been preparing not just to defend themselves, but to fundamentally reshape galactic civilization. They had developed technologies that could disable entire fleets simultaneously, economic systems that could crash planetary economies overnight, and social engineering techniques that could turn species against their own governments. "If we implement Phase 3 now," the President asked, "what are we looking at?" "Complete destabilization of current galactic civilization," Admiral Vasquez admitted. "The Council will collapse within months. Trade networks will fail. Some species may face societal breakdown. But the alternative is Operation Final Solution, which means the extinction of humanity and possibly several other species the purists consider problematic." The decision came down to a simple choice: allow themselves to be exterminated, or take action that would reshape the entire galaxy. For a species that had spent millions of years fighting for survival on a death world, it wasn't really a choice at all. "Initiate Phase 3, President Harrison ordered. "Send the signal to all our agents. It's time to stop hiding and start reshaping this galaxy according to principles of actual freedom and equality." Across the galaxy, human agents who had lived among alien species for decades began activating sleeper protocols that had been dormant for generations. Economic advisors triggered financial collapses that crippled military funding. Political operatives released carefully prepared evidence of corruption and conspiracy. Military specialists activated sabotage programs that had been embedded in council systems for decades, but most importantly, they began revealing themselves. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity stepped fully into the light, and the galaxy learned what a species of persistence predators could accomplish when they had 200 years to prepare for war. The transformation of galactic civilization began at exactly 1427 Galactic Standard Time, on what would later be known as Liberation Day, across 300 worlds and thousands of space stations. Human agents simultaneously executed the most coordinated intelligence operation in galactic history. On the financial hub world of Mercanius Prime, Senior Economic Advisor Sarah Kim walked into the Galactic Trade Exchange and activated a small device that had been disguised as a standard data tablet for 15 years. Within minutes, the economic algorithms that controlled interstellar commerce began executing trades that systematically redistributed wealth from council military accounts to the defense funds of oppressed species. On the military fortress world of Aegis 7, Chief Technical Officer Marcus Chun, who had been maintaining council defense networks for 2 decades, introduced a virus that turned the installation's own security systems against the Purist Coalition fleets. Weapon platforms that had been aimed at potential threats now targeted the ships trying to launch Operation Final Solution. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Humans who had lived entire careers among alien species revealed their true nature and purpose. The revelation wasn't violent or destructive. It was precise, surgical, and devastating in its effectiveness. Admiral Zerthek was aboard his flagship, preparing to launch the first wave of Operation Final Solution. when his command system simply stopped responding. Every screen on his bridge displayed the same message: Operation terminated by Seoul Defense Network. Surrender recommended. How is this possible? He snarled at his technical crew. These are isolated systems. No external access. His chief engineer, a Velanathi named Kexrin, who had served with distinction for over 30 years, straightened and removed a small device from behind his left ear. As he did so, his entire appearance began to shift. His forearms became two, his scaled skin became smooth and pale, and his large eyes became smaller and distinctly human. "Hello?" "Admiral," said the human who had been Chief Engineer Kexrin for 3 decades. "I'm Agent Phoenix 12, Seoul Intelligence Division. I've been maintaining your ship's computer systems since before you took command of this fleet." Zerthik's razor-sharp teeth gnashed in fury. But before he could respond, similar revelations were occurring throughout his fleet. Senior officers, trusted advisors, even some of his own family members were revealing themselves as human agents. The scope of the infiltration was breathtaking. Humans had placed themselves in critical positions throughout the Purist Coalition's command structure. They knew every plan, every contingency, every backup system. Operation Final Solution had been compromised before it began on Nexus Prime. The emergency council session descended into chaos as similar revelations unfolded. High Counselor Morenvas watched in stunned silence as her own senior advisor, a trusted Thanari who had served her family for generations, revealed himself to be human. "Counselor," he said gently, his form shifting to reveal a middle-aged human male with kind eyes. "I'm Agent Diplomat 7. I've been monitoring council activities for 43 years. You've never been in any danger from me, but I've prevented 17 different plots against your life during my service." The revelation that humans had not only infiltrated council society but had actually been protecting some council members from internal threats added another layer of complexity to the situation. These weren't simple spies or saboteurs. They were individuals who had lived complete lives among alien species, forming real relationships and genuine loyalties while serving humanity's long-term interests. President Harrison addressed the galaxy from Terra Station. His message broadcast simultaneously to every inhabited world through communication networks that the humans had secretly controlled for decades. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his image appearing on screens in alien homes, government buildings, and military installations. "My name is President Harrison of the Human Federation. Today, humanity officially rejoins galactic society." The address was remarkable not just for its content but for its presentation. President Harrison spoke in dozens of different languages, his words translated instantly and perfectly for every species in known space. More impressively, the translation wasn't just linguistic. It was cultural, conveying concepts and emotions in ways that each species could understand intuitively. "For 2 centuries, we have existed alongside you in secret, learning, growing, and preparing. We withdrew not from hostility, but from necessity. The galaxy in which we found ourselves was not ready for a species like humanity." Images began appearing on screens across the galaxy, human colonies hidden in pocket dimensions, research facilities that had developed impossible technologies, and defensive installations that could have protected entire star systems. "We are persistence predators from a death world. We evolved to survive anything the universe could create, and we learned to thrive in environments that would kill most other species. But more than that, we learned to adapt, to change ourselves to meet whatever challenges we faced." The broadcast showed humans working alongside alien species on joint projects that had been secretly funded by human resources, research collaborations that had led to medical breakthroughs, environmental restoration projects that had saved dying worlds, and disaster relief efforts that had helped countless species survive natural catastrophes. "We have used our time in hiding not just to grow strong, but to grow wise. We have studied every species in the galaxy, learned from your successes and your failures. Most importantly, we have learned what kind of galaxy we want to help build." President Harrison paused. allowing his words to be absorbed by billions of alien minds across thousands of worlds. The Galactic Council promised order, but delivered oppression. It promised unity, but enforced conformity. It promised peace, but prepared genocide. Today, that ends. The final phase of humanity's revelation began with the systematic exposure of every secret the Council had kept. Not just their crimes against other species, but their internal corruption, their resource hoarding, and their systematic suppression of technological and social advancement among member species. Admiral Vasquez coordinated the operation from her command center, watching as 2 centuries of careful planning finally came to fruition. Status report on Council military assets? 97% of Purist Coalition forces are disabled or surrendering, Commander Chun reported. Mainstream Council fleets are standing down pending negotiations. Most are requesting immediate diplomatic contact with human representatives. And civilian populations? Mixed reactions, as expected. Some species are celebrating liberation from Council control. Others are confused or frightened by the rapid changes. But our cultural preparation teams are activating worldwide. Every major population center now has human representatives who understand local customs and concerns. This was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement. They hadn't just learned to mimic other species physically. They had learned to understand them culturally and psychologically. Human agents emerged from deep cover not as conquerors or liberators, but as neighbors who had always been there, ready to help navigate the transition to a new kind of galactic civilization on thousands of worlds. Humans stepped forward to help manage the crisis they had created. They provided economic support to worlds whose council subsidies had been cut off. They offered technological assistance to species whose development had been artificially restricted. Most importantly, they offered something the council never had: genuine choice. "We don't seek to rule you," President Harrison concluded his address. "We seek to free you to rule yourselves." Humanity offers partnership, not domination. Cooperation, not integration. Diversity, not conformity. Over the coming days, you will receive detailed proposals for a new form of galactic governance based on voluntary cooperation between truly independent species. Some of you may choose to join us. Others may prefer isolation. Still, others may form their own alliances and confederations. The important thing is that the choice will be yours to make freely, without coercion, without deception, and without fear. 6 months later, Admiral Korthduck stood on the observation deck of Terra Station, looking out at Earth, the death world that had produced a species capable of reshaping galactic civilization. He had been offered the choice to return to his home world, or remain as an observer of the new order being built. He had chosen to stay. The galaxy was a very different place now. The Council had dissolved peacefully, its member species choosing to form dozens of smaller confederations, based on genuine shared interests rather than forced integration. Some species had chosen complete isolation, and their choice was respected. Others had formed research partnerships, trade alliances, or cultural exchanges. Humanity had revealed technologies that revolutionized everything from medicine to space travel. But they had done so as gifts freely given rather than tools of control. The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's greatest force for freedom, not through conquest, but through the patient application of intelligence, preparation, and an understanding that true strength came from helping others become strong as well.